Perky Edgerton has long been one of my favorite contemporary artists. Her current show at Gross McCleaf features landscapes along with paintings of what she calls her tiny monsters, which we will get to in a bit. But first, what inspired the title of your show?
I recently moved from my suburban home into the mountains of Western Mass. I love taking walks into the woods. One day I found myself lost, only making my way home by the evening. The feelings and thoughts I experienced alone in the depths of the forest sparked a sense of wonder about what existed but no longer does. This inspiration drives me to create stage-like landscapes that evoke the awareness of the unseen and the passage of time.
Lost in the woods. It's almost too perfect a metaphor for how this amazing artist works. I believe a painting is both an image and an object. For some artists, the image is the only thing that really counts. They render it with almost invisible brushstrokes, attempting to create an illusion of reality as seen through a window. But for artists like Perky Edgerton, the physical nature of paint is inseparable from the very idea of the image. The surfaces of her paintings are intoxicatingly rich. I asked her to detail her process. How do you start?
By putting down pieces of collage paper on the gessoed canvas with Soba glue, and then I paint on top of that, put down a washy terp red probably over the whole thing, and then I start laying in the image, and I make it thick with palette knife, slowly buttering layers of pigment over the canvas surface. When these layers are all dry, I often sand and scrape it out, change the entire composition, then I paint again. I have footprints of interesting broken color and bumpy contours. I like that. And an underbelly of color that shines through in crevices and cracks, alluding to and creating visual evidence of what was before. I really like that. So somewhere in the middle of this journey, I put the canvas on the floor and I put red again all over it and drip it down. It retreats the image into a middle ground instead of a near and far, so I can get a hold on what I want to pull forward and what I want to push back. And then when I start tweaking the emerging pattern, a web of bright lines, all the paint getting caught in the cracks and so forth, connect and rearrange the picture depth. So everybody always asks, how do you know when the painting is done? It's about my relationship with the skin. It has to feel like it has integrity but yet fragility, so it moves, so it's thick and thin in places, and that tells me when the painting is complete.
And just because she is so obsessed with creating a beautiful object doesn't mean that the image is somehow secondary to her. Perky has a wellspring of imagination that has never failed to impress me. It's like she has never lost touch with her inner child and the fearlessness that children have when making art. Perky, am I right in assuming that your childhood played a big role in the artist that you were going to become?
I'm a visual storyteller, and when I was young, the only babysitter that could tame my wild brothers was a young girl who came with a golden voice, a guitar, and a trove of old ballads. She sang songs about outlaws, murderous men, scorned women, seals who became human, sad princesses in arranged marriage, mournfully sang as a confessional. The soft lullaby quality perfumed the violent lyrics, lulled us to sleep, and confused us in the morning. The mystery and power of a good story took residence in my heart. When I was 17, our family lived in Florence, Italy, where my dad, an art historian of Italian Renaissance art and later ancient Mayan art, researched his first book about the rediscovery of linear perspective. Every weekend we visited many Tuscan churches to examine the frescoes, especially murals painted in the late 1400s, the dawn of the Renaissance. This rub of the old and the new was so exciting to see. Not only gesturing figures placed in shallow stage-like spaces to make obvious for the people religious stories. Most of my life I've used these picture-making conventions to compose my paintings.
You've mentioned old and new and the passage of time. Speaking of which, I understand that you and your sculptor husband, Brian Munier, are grandparents now. Do your little monster paintings relate to that?
I started making these tiny monster paintings during COVID when I couldn't see my grandboys. I missed them so terribly. I was going to send them these cards of goofy things they like, monsters and dragons. And I had these pieces of board that Brian had made for me, little squares of board. I was having so much fun doing experimentation with collage and different kinds of paints, photo transfers, and wax. And then I decided to put on top of the backgrounds these tiny monsters that I call them, with every intention to send to my boys, which I never did. But the funny thing is to go into the studio, I would look at them and I would just start giggling. They just gave me such joy to make.
They're just wonderful. You can catch Perky Edgerton lost in the woods and meet her little monsters at Gross McCleaf Gallery through November 9th, 2024.